The fluorescent lights in the recovery wing of Boston General were too bright. I remember thinking that how absurd it was to notice something so trivial when my entire body felt like it had been split in half and reassembled wrong. I, Natalie Ashford, had been lying in this bed for 6 days. 6 days since the emergency C-section that nearly killed me. 6 days since my daughter, Olivia, came into this world screaming, furious, and perfect. The doctors had used words like hemorrhaging and critical and emergency transfusion in hushed tones outside my door, thinking I couldn't hear. But I heard everything. What I hadn't heard in the last 14 hours was my husband's voice. My phone sat on the bedside table, screen dark. The last message from Ryan was timestamped 10:47 the previous night. Long day. Crashing at the house, kiss live for me. That was it. No visit. No call this morning. No explanation for why he wasn't here when the surgeon came by at 7 a.m. to tell me they were cautiously optimistic about my recovery, that I could potentially go home tomorrow if my numbers held steady. I'd nodded and smiled and waited for the door to close before pressing my face into the pillow. The nurse Janet, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had become something of a guardian angel, came in to check my vitals around noon. She glanced at the empty chair beside my bed, the one that should have had a husband in it. He coming today? He said he would, I lied. Janet's mouth tightened. She'd seen this before. I could tell by the way she didn't press it, just squeezed my hand a little harder than necessary before leaving. At 2:15, my phone finally buzzed. Ryan. But it wasn't a call, it was a photo. He was standing on what looked like a rooftop, the Boston skyline golden behind him, a cocktail in his hand. He was wearing the navy linen shirt I'd bought him for his birthday. His smile was wide, easy, the kind of smile you wear when you haven't spent 6 days watching your wife fight for her life. The caption read, Team Celebration. Close the Meridian deal. Huge night. We'll swing by tomorrow morning, love you. Team Celebration. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. I zoomed in. Behind him, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, was his business partner, Derek, and Derek's wife. And next to them, a woman I didn't recognize, dark hair, red dress, laughing at something just off camera. The table behind them was littered with champagne bottles. This wasn't a quick toast. This was a party. A planned, dressed-up, hours-long party. I looked down at Olivia, sleeping in the hospital bassinet. The IV line was still taped to my wrist. The catheter bag hung beside the bed. My abdomen was held together with surgical staples. And my husband was on a rooftop drinking Veuve Clicquot. I didn't cry. Something beyond crying was happening inside me. It was a cold, quiet thing. Like a door closing in a house you'll never return to. I picked up the phone and called my mother. She answered on the first ring, the way she always did. Natalie. How are you feeling? Did the doctor come by? What did he say about your hemoglobin? Mom. My voice was steady. Almost unnaturally so. Ryan isn't here. He hasn't been here since yesterday morning. He's at a rooftop party celebrating a business deal. He sent me a photo. The silence on my mother's end was unlike any silence I'd ever heard from her. My mother, Judge Catherine Ashford of the Massachusetts Superior Court, was not a woman who did silence. She filled rooms with her presence, courtrooms with her authority, family dinners with her opinions. But right now, the line was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in her study. When she spoke, her voice was different, lower, precise. Every word placed like a chess piece. You said he sent a photo. Save it. Screenshot the message. What time did he last visit? Yesterday morning. He stayed 40 minutes. He was on his phone most of the time. Has he called the nurse's station, asked about your condition? I don't think so. Janet would have mentioned it. Another beat of silence. Your brother is in the city. I'm calling him now. Then I'm calling Martin Hale. Do you remember Martin? Martin Hale. My mother's former law clerk, now one of the most feared family attorneys in New England. I'd met him at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. He'd brought a very expensive bottle of wine and had the quiet, watchful eyes of a man who spent his life cataloging other people's mistakes. I remember. Good. Do not call Ryan, do not text him, do not respond to anything he sends. Can you do that? Yes. Natalie. Her voice softened, just a fraction. You are not alone, you are never alone. I'll be there by tonight. She hung up. I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Olivia made a small sound in her sleep, a tiny, wet sigh that cracked something open in my chest. I reached over, ignoring the pull of the IV, and placed my hand on her back. Her warmth seeped into my palm. It's okay, I whispered. Mama's here. My brother, Ethan, arrived at the hospital at 4:30. He was still in his suit. He worked as a federal prosecutor in the Financial Crimes Division, and his face had the controlled intensity I recognized from childhood as barely contained fury. He didn't hug me. He looked at the IV, the monitors, the empty chair, and his jaw tightened. Show me the photo. I handed him the phone. He studied it for a long moment, then handed it back. Have you checked your bank accounts recently? The question caught me off guard. What? No. Why would I? Ethan sat down in the empty chair, Ryan's chair, and leaned forward. Natalie, I need you to log into your accounts right now. All of them. Checking, savings, the joint investment account, everything. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I opened my banking app with trembling fingers. The checking account looked normal. The savings account was fine. But when I opened the joint brokerage account at Fidelity, the one funded primarily by my trust distributions, I felt the room tilt. 3 weeks ago, the balance had been just over $1.4 million. I knew because I'd checked it when we were discussing setting up Olivia's college fund. Now it showed $312,000. Over $1 million had been moved in a series of transfers, all within the last 3 weeks, the exact period I'd been in and out of the hospital with pregnancy complications, preeclampsia, and finally, the emergency surgery. Where did the money go? My voice sounded far away, like someone else was speaking. That's what we're going to find out. Ethan was already on his phone, texting. But I have a theory, and if I'm right, your husband has a much bigger problem than a missed hospital visit. My mother arrived at 8 p.m., still in her courthouse attire. She walked into my hospital room the way she walked into a courtroom, with the absolute certainty that she belonged there and that things were about to change. Behind her was Martin Hale, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Ryan's Rooftop cocktails. Martin shook my hand gently, mindful of the IV. Natalie. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I've been briefed by your mother and your brother. With your permission, I'd like to begin. What followed was the most surreal hour of my life. While my newborn daughter slept 3 feet away, Martin Hale sat in a hospital chair and methodically dismantled my marriage on a legal pad. He asked about the prenuptial agreement. Yes, we had one, my mother had insisted. He asked about property ownership. The brownstone in Back Bay was mine, purchased before the marriage with trust money. He asked about Ryan's business, Blackstone Capital Partners, a mid-sized private equity firm he'd co-founded with Derek Calloway. The firm, Martin said, tapping his pen. Who funded the initial capitalization? I hesitated. I did. It was an investment. $250,000 from my trust as seed capital. Ryan structured it as a convertible note. Martin and Ethan exchanged a look I didn't like. Natalie, Ethan said carefully. I ran some preliminary checks this afternoon. Blackstone Capital Partners has been under review by the SEC for the past 4 months. Nothing public yet, it's still in the inquiry stage. But the complaints center around potential misrepresentation of fund performance to investors and suspected commingling of client funds with personal accounts. The words hit me one by one, each a separate impact. SEC. Misrepresentation. Commingling. Ryan's firm is being investigated? Ryan's firm is being investigated, Ethan confirmed. And the timing of those transfers out of your brokerage account, 3 weeks, while you were medically incapacitated, suggests he may be moving assets in anticipation of either a freeze or a filing. I looked at my mother. Her face was granite. He used your illness as cover, she said. Not a question. Martin was already writing. Here's what we do. Tonight, we freeze everything. Emergency motion for asset preservation. Your mother can expedite through her contacts at the court. We change the locks on the brownstone tomorrow morning. We revoke his access to all accounts tied to your trust or your name. And we file for divorce on grounds of abandonment and financial fraud. And the SEC investigation? I asked. Ethan leaned back. That's not our fight. That's the federal government's fight. But when it becomes public, and it will, Ryan is going to need every dollar he can get his hands on for legal defense. Which means the money he's already moved from your accounts isn't a rainy day fund. It's a war chest. And he built it while you were fighting for your life. That night, after everyone left and the hospital settled into its muffled nighttime rhythm, I lay awake listening to Olivia breathe. My phone had 17 unread messages from Ryan, a progression from casual to confused to annoyed. Hey babe, you up? Then tried calling, everything okay? Then Natalie seriously called me back, getting worried. The concern felt performed. A man who was genuinely worried would be here. Not texting from a bar. At 11:42 p.m., one final message, coming by first thing tomorrow, love you and live. I didn't respond. I just watched the words glow in the dark room and felt nothing. He arrived at 9:15 the next morning, coffee in hand, hair freshly styled. He was wearing cologne. He walked into my hospital room with the easy confidence of a man who believed the world operated on his schedule. Hey, beautiful. He leaned down to kiss my forehead. I turned my face slightly so his lips hit my temple. How's my girls? Doc says you might get to go home today, right? I've got everything set up, cleaned the house, got the nursery ready. Where were you last night, Ryan? He blinked. The smile stayed in place, but his eyes shifted. I told you. The Meridian deal closed. The whole team went out. It was a work thing. A work thing on a rooftop with champagne while your wife is in the hospital recovering from emergency surgery. Nat, come on. He set the coffee down, ran a hand through his hair. The gesture I used to find charming now looked rehearsed. It was one night. I've been here every single day. You've been here for a total of 11 hours over 6 days. Janet keeps a visitor log. His expression flickered, something beneath the smooth surface, irritation maybe, calculation, definitely. So what, you're keeping score now? I've been working, Natalie. Someone has to keep the business running well. He stopped himself, but not fast enough. While what? While I'm lying here with staples in my stomach? While our daughter was in the NICU for 2 days? Finish the sentence, Ryan. He didn't. Instead, he walked to the window and looked out. When he turned back, the charming mask was gone. What was underneath was harder, colder, more honest. You know what? Fine, yes. I went to a party, because I have been suffocating for months, Natalie. The pregnancy complications, the bed rest, the emergency, the guilt. I needed one night to feel like a normal human being. Is that a crime? No, I said. But moving $1 million out of our investment account while I was unconscious might be. The color drained from his face. It was instantaneous and absolute, like watching a screen go dark. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he stood perfectly still. Then the mask came back, but it was damaged now, poorly fitted. I don't know what you're talking about. The Fidelity account, Ryan. The one funded by my trust. It's down over $1 million. Transfers made while I was in surgery, while I was in recovery, while I was too sick to check my phone. Where did the money go? He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Those were investment rebalances. Standard portfolio moves. My financial advisor. Your financial advisor, I said, or the SEC's. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. His face went through a sequence of emotions, shock, then fear, then a rage so sudden and hot it made me flinch. Who told you that? His voice was low, dangerous. Your brother? That self-righteous fed with his government salary and his, did your mother put him up to this? Did she? Get out. Natalie. Get out of my room, Ryan. Right now. He stood there for a moment, vibrating with a fury that might have frightened me if I'd been standing. But I was lying in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm and our daughter sleeping beside me, and I was not afraid. I was something far more dangerous than afraid. He left. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. Martin Hale filed the papers that afternoon. By the time I was discharged, the following morning wheeled out by Janet, who slipped a card with her personal number into my bag. The locks on the brownstone had been changed. Ryan's access to every joint account had been frozen, and a temporary restraining order had been granted based on evidence of financial exploitation of a medically vulnerable spouse. Ethan drove me home. My mother was already there, having transformed the guest room into what she called a recovery suite and operations center. Martin had set up in the dining room. A forensic accountant named Patricia Chen was cross-referencing the brokerage transfers with Blackstone Capital's internal records. Records Ethan had obtained through channels I didn't ask about. "Natalie," Patricia said, looking up from her laptop with the expression of someone who has found exactly what she expected and wished she hadn't. "The $1,000,000 transferred from your Fidelity account went to 3 places. $400,000 to a personal account in the Cayman Islands held solely in Ryan's name. $350,000 to what appears to be a shell company called Emerald Bay Holdings, which shares a registered agent with a woman named Vanessa Moretti. And $260,000 into Blackstone Capital's operating account which, based on what I'm seeing, was used to cover a shortfall in client redemption requests." Vanessa Moretti. The name meant nothing to me. I looked at my mother. She was already on her phone. "Martin, we need a full background on a Vanessa Moretti. Connection to Ryan Calloway. Everything." It took less than 24 hours. Vanessa Moretti, 31, interior designer based in Newport. Instagram full of luxury homes, yachts, weekend getaways. And there, buried 3 months back in her tagged photos, a shot at a restaurant in Providence. She was laughing, champagne in hand, and reflected in the window behind her, unmistakable even in the glass, was my husband. Martin laid it all out on my dining room table like a surgeon displaying instruments before an operation. The Cayman account, opened 14 months ago. The shell company, registered 8 months ago. Transfer records showing a steady stream of money from our joint accounts to both entities throughout my pregnancy. Hotel receipts in Newport, Providence, Martha's Vineyard weekends. He'd told me he was traveling for client meetings. He wasn't just having an affair, Martin said. He was building an exit. A financial escape hatch funded entirely by your trust money, designed to be activated once the SEC investigation became public. He would claim the marriage failed due to stress, negotiate a settlement, and disappear to the Caribbean with Miss Moretti and your money. The pregnancy accelerated his timeline. Your medical crisis gave him the cover he needed to make the large transfers. My mother, who had been silent through the entire presentation, finally spoke. "How much can we recover?" "All of it," Martin said. "The Cayman account is frozen. As of this morning, your brother's contacts were very helpful. The shell company's assets are traceable. And the money moved into Blackstone's operating account is now part of the SEC's evidence chain, which means Ryan can't touch it either. He's effectively broke." That evening, as I nursed Olivia in the quiet of my living room, in my house, that I had bought with my money, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered on speaker, Martin nodding from across the room. "Natalie." Ryan's voice was raw. The polish was gone. "What have you done? My cards are declined. I can't access anything." "The office, they're saying there's a freeze." "My lawyer," says Natalie. "This is insane. We need to talk." "Whatever your mother told you." "My mother didn't tell me anything, Ryan. Your bank statements told me everything. That money. Those were business investments. You don't understand the pressure I've been under." "I understand perfectly. I understand Emerald Bay Holdings. I understand the Cayman Islands. And I understand Vanessa Moretti." The line went so silent I thought he'd hung up. When he spoke again, his voice was different. "Stripped bare. Ugly. You had no right to go through your... What? My money? My trust funds? The accounts you drained while I was bleeding on an operating table? Tell me, Ryan, were you on the phone with her when they called the code on me? When they had to transfuse 4 units of blood to keep me alive? Were you texting Vanessa then too? You're crazy. Your whole family is crazy. Your mother. Your brother, this is harassment. This is consequences, I said. And this is the last time I will ever speak to you. Anything further goes through Martin Hale. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. Olivia stirred against my chest, her tiny hand gripping my shirt. That was well done, my mother said from the doorway. She was holding 2 cups of tea. She set one beside me and sat down. I don't feel well done. I feel hollowed out. Of course you do. You're grieving the man you thought he was. That's natural. But the man you thought he was never existed. The man who exists stole from you while you were dying. That man doesn't deserve your grief. He deserves exactly what he's getting. The divorce was finalized in 4 months fast by Massachusetts standards, but Martin Hale was not a man who tolerated delays. Ryan's attorney, a swaggering litigator named Phil Russo, tried every play in the book. He argued the prenup was coercive. The judge disagreed. He argued I was mentally unstable, citing the trauma of surgery. My medical records showed a woman of extraordinary resilience, and my surgeon testified to that effect. He argued that Ethan had used his federal position to persecute a private citizen. Ethan's office released a statement noting that the SEC investigation into Blackstone Capital had been initiated 18 months before Ethan was even aware of Ryan's connection to the firm. Each argument crumbled, each motion was denied. The forensic accounting revealed the full scope, $1.3 million diverted over 20 months. The affair with Vanessa, documented in texts that contained passages so callous they made the judge visibly wince during the hearing. One in particular. She's so focused on the baby, she doesn't notice anything. By the time the kid is born and the dust settles, we'll be in Turks and Caicos counting her daddy's money. The judge, the Honorable Anne Sullivan, a woman my mother had never appeared before and had no connection to, a fact Martin verified to prevent any appearance of bias, delivered her ruling with cold precision. Full custody to me. The brownstone. Mine. All trust-derived assets, returned. Ryan was ordered to pay restitution for the diverted funds, though everyone in the room knew he had nothing left to pay with. Blackstone Capital had collapsed under the SEC investigation, Derek Calloway had turned state's witness, and Ryan was facing federal charges for securities fraud. He stood in the courtroom in a suit that didn't fit right anymore. He'd lost weight, the kind that comes from sleepless nights and liquid dinners. When Judge Sullivan finished, he looked at me across the room. Not with anger. Not with regret. With the blank, bewildered expression of a man who has just realized the game was never what he thought it was. I didn't look away. I held his gaze until he dropped it. Outside the courthouse, on a bright October morning with leaves falling gold and red along the common, my mother took my arm. How do you feel? Like I survived something. You did. You survived him. And now you get to decide what comes next. What came next was the part no one tells you about. The part after the victory, after the legal papers are signed and the locks are changed and the villain is vanquished. The quiet part. The 3 a.m. part when Olivia is crying and the brownstone feels enormous and the absence of another person, even a terrible person, is a physical ache. But in that absence, something else grew. Space. Room to breathe, to think, to become whatever I was going to become without the weight of a man who saw me as a bank account with a heartbeat. I went back to work. I ran a health tech startup called Lyra Health, focused on maternal and postpartum care. The irony was not lost on me. The company had been my passion project for 3 years, the thing Ryan had called your little app with a dismissive wave. It had 12 employees when I went on medical leave. By the time I came back, the team had kept it running beautifully, a testament to the people I'd hired and the culture I'd built. I threw myself into it with a ferocity that surprised even me. Within 6 months, we'd closed a Series B round. Within a year, Lyra was partnering with hospital systems across New England to provide real-time postpartum monitoring and support. The platform I'd designed, born from the loneliness of my own hospital room, was now helping thousands of new mothers feel less alone. The Boston Globe did a profile. From hospital bed to boardroom, how Natalie Ashford turned personal crisis into a healthcare revolution. I did the interview in my office, Olivia on my lap, speaking about the gaps in postpartum care, the isolation, the systemic failures that left women vulnerable to medical emergencies, to financial exploitation, to partners who saw their weakness as an opportunity. I didn't mention Ryan by name. I didn't have to. Everyone knew. 14 months after the divorce, on a rainy Tuesday, I received a letter forwarded through Martin's office. It was from the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury. Ryan had been sentenced to 37 months for securities fraud and wire fraud. The letter was handwritten, 2 pages. I read it once, standing in my kitchen while Olivia played with blocks on the floor. It said he was sorry. It said he'd lost everything. It said he understood now what he'd thrown away. It said he hoped, someday, Olivia would know her father. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and got down on the floor with my daughter. She handed me a red block with a gummy smile, the same determined expression I saw in my own mirror every morning. I stacked it on top of her tower. "Higher, Mama," she said. "Higher," I agreed. That night, after Olivia was asleep, I stood at the window of my brownstone looking out at the rain-slicked street. The reflection in the glass showed a woman I barely recognized from 18 months ago. Thinner, yes. Harder in some ways. But standing. Standing on her own 2 feet in her own house, running her own company, raising her own daughter. I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered the way she always did on the first ring. "Natalie." "Mom." "Thank you." A pause. "For what, specifically?" "For teaching me that love isn't supposed to cost you everything. That the people who truly love you show up. Not with champagne on a rooftop, but at your hospital bed at midnight." My mother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice had the faintest crack, the only crack I'd ever heard in the armor of Judge Catherine Ashford. "You never needed me to teach you that, sweetheart. You just needed to remember it." I hung up and turned off the lights. The brownstone settled into silence, the good kind, the safe kind, the kind that doesn't echo with absence but hums with possibility. Upstairs, my daughter slept. Tomorrow, my company would help another mother feel less alone. And somewhere in that rain-washed darkness, the woman I was becoming was already taking shape, not defined by what had been done to her, but by what she chose to build from the wreckage. The story of the woman who was left behind was over. The story of the woman who stood up had only just begun.